well grounded in the notion that taking an oath of office is something significant. It is not simply a perfunctory gesture in order to facilitate occupying a seat, but it is a promise to God to act before witnesses, to act in the interest of the tax-paying public. And I have seen him over several years doing precisely that at all times, executing his responsibility faithfully and judiciously in all aspects of his responsibility. Ed, come on up here and visit these folks a little. It is my distinct privilege to introduce.
Thank you, Easily. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and I just particularly want to thank all of you for coming out. I believe you're here because you love our country, because you love our state, because you love your families, and because you love righteousness. And so, until we turn our nation back to righteousness, the things that we do in government are going to be wasted. We're in a spiritual warfare, and until we remember that, and until we honor the things that our Creator honors, I don't think we're going to see even the best of our efforts in politics bear the fruits that we want. Restore life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to our nation. But one of the battles that we do have to fight while we're in the political realm is the battle over a government that has become far too powerful for the people that it represents. And probably the most powerful element in our government's overreaching is the tax policy. There's a reason why our founding fathers expressly refused to allow a tax on income when they penned our Constitution. They made very sure that no man's labors would be taxed, and they said the reason for that was because the taxing of those labors was a way to empower government over them. It was the opposite of liberty. And our founders loved liberty enough that they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. There really is nothing else they could have pledged, so I think they would have pledged more. But they saw the income tax as exactly what it is, as a threat to our security, as a threat to our liberty, as a threat to our choices. And as a result, they refused to allow an income tax in our Constitution. It took an amendment to that Constitution in 1917 before it was possible to implement a tax on income. I believe that that's the most powerful tool bad politicians have, is the income tax. A lot of study has been done on what kind of tax system, what kind of approach to taxation would work. It would protect liberties, and would still empower people to make the choices that we'd like to make about our lives. Because I believe the government's responsibility is to protect our liberty, not to dictate to us how to live. But the income tax empowers them to dictate how we live. I hope that some of you have already looked at the fair tax. The fair tax is an elimination of all taxes on income, and it's in its place as it's replaced with a tax on consumption. You're free to buy what you want. You're free to you choose when to pay taxes, when not to pay taxes. One of the things that most of you probably, if you've looked into the income tax at all, already know, our income tax code has over 77,000 pages. How many of you think you are experts in the income tax code? You know, I don't ever intend to be an expert in the income tax code because I do not have time to learn 77,000 pages of tax code. The other thing that you might not know about the income tax is we average 500 changes a year in the income tax code. 500 changes a year. Not only do you have to keep up with 77,000 pages, but you also have to keep up with 500 changes every year and how they affect issues throughout that 77,000 pages. I don't know about you, but I look at that and I can't see anything that is more intimidating to the average citizen, more intrusive into the taxpayer's life than that kind of an income tax code. The reason that our founders refused to allow a tax on income is because they predicted that that's exactly what would happen. That it would become so complicated, so complex in its design, that there would be no way that the average American could understand it and it would become so unwieldy that we would be at its mercy. That's where we are today. We're at the mercy of the IRS agents who also haven't read the 77,000 pages and who will give different answers in over a third of the questions that they are asked when you call them up for expert advice and you're filling out your income tax. We need to learn more about the income tax. Knowledge is power, and we need more citizens to study the tax code, to understand the fair tax, to be able to explain it to others, to be able to sell the idea that our tax code is evil and needs to be removed, and that we need a tax that supports liberty, that does not destroy liberty. I appreciate the chance to make a few remarks. I'm happy to talk to you about other issues. Tonight, though, I wanted to focus on what we need to do when we get a hold of that tax code and strangle that income tax to death. And in its place,
Thanks a ton, Ed. Now, you aren't under obligation to speak primarily, almost exclusively about the fair tax, but we're awful glad you did. Now, don't forget, folks, that Missouri is contemplating a fair tax, a replacement of the Missouri income tax. And Ed Emery will be precisely the right fellow to carry that through the Missouri Senate and get it passed and get the Missouri income tax off your back. Now, I want to introduce Todd Akin, and I've gotten to somewhat acquainted with him. We had a little event, being from over in Kansas, I got a little bragging rights that I gotta mention before we go much further. Now, you hear a lot of drivel about the Tea Party being falling apart, being dead. Well, there's 10 incumbent Republican senators over in the state of Kansas that tell you the Tea Party ain't dead, because it knocked them off. We did a pretty good job. We had 12 of them targeted, and we got 10 of them gone, and they were lying. They were constantly in league with liberals, perpetrating things upon the citizens of Kansas that are absolutely shameful, and they won't be harassing us for the next 4 years, that's for sure. Now, we don't suppose that this job is done, and I think one of the things that is important, we had a little event down in Topeka celebrating the victory the other day on last Saturday. Had quite a few folks there, had several legislators and a considerable number of people. We had a very pleasant time. It was billed as a celebration of principle, which is what got these folks through the primary election. They weren't there talking about the typical drivel that you hear from politicians. That I'm for the Second Amendment rights. Well, half the Democrats are for Second Amendment rights, for crying out loud. If that constitutes conservative credential, we are in one god-awful shape. Another one that they seem, they're pro-life. Well, for heaven's sakes, there's quite a few Democrats that are pro-life. That doesn't qualify as a conservative credential in my estimation. It's an absolute minimum requirement to be considered as a possible conservative. So what is it that does constitute principles worthy of being called conservative? Number one, it is to address oneself to principle. When contemplating legislation, how many of the legislators you know even know what to ask? What are the 4 questions that ought to be asked before any piece of legislation is either supported or opposed? I think it's a very simple question. Number 1, is it moral? Number 2, is it constitutional? Number 3, is it affordable? And number 4, do the people both need and want it? Failing any one of those questions, it ought not even be considered and must be defeated. The idea that the government can do everything that needs to be done for us is a shameful notion. It was not the government doing things for us that made America what it is. I've got a couple of very quick things that I want to call to your attention. I study Scripture quite a little bit. I ran across one the other day that I hope you'll find uplifting. Our nation today, Dr. Warren, who was killed at Breeds Hill in the Revolutionary War, a few months before that, about 90 days before that battle, he addressed a group of people commemorating the Boston Massacre. They were just ordinary Boston citizens. I'm sure there were a few legislators there. And he said, our nation is now in danger, but it is not to be despaired of. You will decide the great questions that will determine the happiness and prosperity of generations of Americans yet unborn. Act worthy of yourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, this election coming up is critically important. We must avoid being caught in the foolishness of what we hear largely in media. I notice a lot of media folks here, and I hope you don't consider it, hope you don't feel disparaged, even as it is a little disparaging. The horse race doesn't mean a thing. What we need to look at is character, and that's why I'm here tonight. There are two men standing here among us who have taken the personal courage to put themselves out there, subject themselves to ridicule and absolute ridiculous behavior from all manner of people, everything about their lives being scrutinized. Goodness gracious, I wouldn't do that. It's this simple. There's a lot of bad stories out there about me, and unfortunately some of them's true. Let me very quickly read this to you. I had it written down because I'm not good at remembering scripture. I always get a little something wrong. But this comes from 2 Chronicles chapter 32, 6 through 8. And he set captains of war over the people and gathered them together to him in the street of the gate of the city, and spake comfortably to them, saying, be strong and courageous. Be not afraid nor dismayed for the king of Assyria. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the time, the king of Assyria was arraying for war against the Israelites. Nor for all the multitude that is with him, for there be more with us than with him. With him is an arm of flesh, but with us is the Lord our God to help us and to fight our battles. And the people rested themselves upon the words of Hezekiah, king of Judah. I think when we, as a people, acknowledge the existence of God and are willing to, we hear a lot about American exceptionalism. I don't hold much with that. As a matter of fact, it kind of irritates me to hear that talked about. If we are exceptional, that would imply that we're somehow better than Europeans, Africans, or South Americans. I don't believe that for 1/8 of a second. The whole of the world can look to the United States every single day, and by our prosperity, our peacefulness, our generosity, and our remarkable fortunes in war, they can see the unmistakable handiwork of the providential care and discriminating grace of God Almighty. These two men understand that, and that is why I am bound to do everything I can to help them get elected and call you attention to the value of voting for men of character. Todd Akin, come on up here and visit with these folks a little bit. Thank you.
I just took the mic away from Todd. We have a young lady here who came to entertain us with her voice. Would she please come up and...
While we're waiting on her, I am going to publicly apologize to her because I'm a little like a blind dog in a meat house. I don't know much about politics. Thank you. Go ahead. I have heard this lady sing before, and she's good.
God bless America.
of my ineptitude. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming out, and really appreciate a couple minutes to share with you and talk to you. And as you're probably aware, there were calls on certain people's part at the top party leadership. They said that I needed to step down. And that was a question that I had to take a good look at. And as I was thinking it through, it wasn't about me. It's a question about really what's the right thing to do. If you think back over the last 16 months, what's happened? Well, we had a long primary, 8 different people in the primary, and people spent lots and lots of money. Many of you volunteered. Some of you may have worked at 107 degrees at the hot parades on the 4th of July. And when the whole thing was said and done, the people of Missouri and the Republican Party chose their nominee. We call it voting. And now there's certain people that decide they want to change that, and so party bosses decide they want to appoint instead of take people who will vote. Now, is that what we want in Missouri? Is that what we want in any state? What we really want is we have a system, an orderly system, and the person that's elected is the person. And so if you replace them with somebody, what does that do? What precedent does that set? And so my thought about the whole situation was that the right thing to do is I've been chosen and I should go straight forward, and my plan is to go straight forward to November and replace Claire McCaskill. The race has changed a little bit, as you can see. I wasn't the pick of the party bosses. And so this is a race a lot like our primary. Just people who are regular old people are coming out and saying, look, there's a principle involved here. Somebody was elected and we want to stand behind him. Now, the situation is that increasingly I found people coming up to me, I'm buying gas, and somebody comes up and says, you're Akin. I go, yeah. And they go, you stand tall. Don't you let those party bosses replace you. You go in there, you go fight and win. And so, I'll tell you, if they want to cut off all the money and try and torpedo what we're doing, but the fact is that the checks are coming in, people are writing from all over America, and they're saying, wait a minute, we understand. There's certain people that want to choose who the next Republican senators are going to be. They chose Christ. But unfortunately, the people of Florida didn't vote the right way for him. You know, they got Rubio. Well, what are we going to do with that? So Chris speaks at the Democrat convention. Well, how good a choice was that? They also didn't want Rand Paul. But unfortunately, that's who people elected. And that's why we have an election process in this country. So I believe the principle here is to move forward with the election process. And let me tell you what this campaign is about, because there's really two very stark choices. And the way that we have voted, both Claire McCaskill votes one way, I vote about the opposite. This isn't one where it's going to be Tweedledee and Tweedledum. You can't tell the difference between the two. We're about opposite on everything. And you're going to have a clear choice. You're going to have a choice what you want to do. And I would suggest that my voting pattern is going to bring more jobs and more freedom, less big government, and a bright hope for the future. And Claire McCaskill's voting has been for less jobs, less freedom, a lot more big government, big taxes, and the same stalled economy that we have right now. Now let's take a look at just kind of where we are. You can take a look at the fact that we've got a 45% increase in food stamps, a 10% increase in poverty. We've got Claire McCaskill voting with Obama 98% of the time. You got to give her credit for guts to say that she's a moderate when she votes with Barack Obama 98% of the time. That's not my country. You know, she also said that the Senate had passed a budget, which they haven't done in 1,200 days. And so this is kind of a picture. You go to the gas station, and what happens? Your gasoline is twice as expensive as it was just about 4 years ago. And you can take a look at all kinds of other numbers, but particularly unemployment. The unemployment numbers remain high. They're saying that they're about 8-something%. Of course, that's a phony, baloney government number, because if you've been unemployed for more than a year, what happens? They don't count you anymore. So what's the real unemployment rate? Well, we don't know exactly, but it's probably north of 12%. And that's a reflection of an economy and a government model that these liberals are pushing that just flat doesn't work. Now let's go for a straight comparison so it's just clear you know who you're voting for. One of the issues is Obamacare, right? I voted 30 times to repeal Obamacare. Percent of Missouri voters said they don't want the efficiency of the federal government and the compassion of the IRS running our healthcare system in Missouri. But Claire McCaskill was the vote because they needed 60 votes. She was the vote that passed it. If she hadn't voted for it, you wouldn't have had it. So Claire very clear choice. Let's go to another choice. And here's the second choice. And that is people in Missouri, as I've had a chance to campaign around, have a respect for the U.S. Constitution. We're not too happy. We're not too happy with a president who ignores the responsibility to check in with Congress before he goes and bombs Libya. We're not too happy with a president who misuses his authority and decides to try to cover up Fast and Furious. But one of the parts of that Constitution is the Second Amendment, which is particularly dear to people in the state of Missouri. The National Rifle Association has given me an A rating. Claire McCaskill has an A. You got a clear choice. You got the other situation too. You got the Wall Street bailout, where we're going to take your government money and we're going to buy Goldman Sachs at double book value. And that's something Claire McCaskill supported, and I'm against it. I don't want any bailouts. I could go on and on. We could talk a little bit about taxes. This is a tax forum. You want to talk about a really bad kind of tax. Look, the income tax is just loaded with all of these special deals for all these groups of people. And trying to deal with it is very, very difficult. Everybody has a special interest in the income tax. But here's the kind of tax that Claire McCaskill wants to change. It's called the death tax. You have tax on cigarettes, tax on booze. But now there's one thing about the death tax that the liberals really like. It's because everybody's going to die. So they get you, no matter when. And so what are we going to do with the death tax? Here's what happens. The way it is now, you've got a business. It's worth $5 million. You're hoping your son's going to take it over. If you die, you got a $5 million exemption. Your son doesn't have to pay anything to inherit your business, and you got a couple dozen people working for you. Everything goes fine. Claire McCaskill voted to take it back to $1 million. So here's what happens in that scenario. You die. You have $1 million exemption. $4 million is subject to tax, not at 35, but at 55% tax rate, which means you got to come up as soon as your dad dies with $2 million plus. That means you're going to have to sell part of the business, and guess what happens to the jobs? Goodbye. They go somewhere else. And that's the kind of idiocy that we've got in the Senate with Barack Obama and Claire McCaskill with the highest corporate tax rate in the world. We're having trouble with unemployment. And they got the death tax going on that they want to change as well. And so Claire McCaskill has voted for 500 tax increases. You won't find me supporting tax increases, particularly now. In fact, not only would Ronald Reagan tell you that it's dumb when the economy's in trouble to raise taxes, even JFK understood that. So we don't want to be raising taxes a lot. I can go back and forth. There's one other place, obviously, where Claire McCaskill and I are different. I'm pro-life. I'm rated by the National Right to Life as an A. Claire McCaskill. So Claire McCaskill is rated F, okay? F. She wants abortions all the way through the 9th month. And then you got an exact opposite, back and forth. You choose. Now here's your choice. Do you want Claire McCaskill to take Washington, D.C. stuff and bring it back into the state of Missouri? Or do you want me to take your common sense values from Missouri and take them into Washington, D.C.? I'd like to talk to you just a little bit about something that we've seen after September 11th. And that's the nature of what this country, America, is. We've grown up here, we love this country, and one of the things that we got going in America is the fact, as we look back, that we are a totally unique country. In World War I, my grandfather and that generation fought and won a military victory around the whole globe. And in World War II, we won another victory around the whole globe. We had become the victors. But we didn't annex any territory. We didn't crown any kings or emperors or anything like that. In fact, if you look at the history of America, what we did was we taxed ourselves to rebuild our enemies. When has there been a nation like that in all history? America is a very unique and special country. We have the oldest written constitution in the world. And when you see a tsunami or an earthquake or something, you see a gray hole with the red, white, and blue flying proudly, and they're going to bring medical aid and water and electricity and things and food to the people who are in trouble. And we take that for granted because that is America. That's who we are. We're those people. There are at least 40 different nations who had tyrants ruling over them. And because we shed our blood of our sons and daughters and our forefathers, we went in and freed those countries and gave them an opportunity once again to be free people. And so the question is, how is it that America came to be who we are? What's the heart of who we are as a people? And I would suggest that the secret that made America different than any other nation in the world is the fact it was this visionary idea that there is a creator, God, who blessed us with life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. And that's what we fought wars. Because people tried to take our lives and our liberties and the pursuit of happiness away from us. And there's a reason why life is first. It's because if you're dead, none of the other liberties make much difference. Let's take the words of political people that talk about abortions and set that aside and take a look, without dealing with abortions, at the nature of how Americans act, not what they say. And I would suggest to you that America is a pro-life nation. Yeah. It's a pro-life nation. It's a pro-life nation because on September 11th, a number of years ago, what happened? You had a rescue worker going into one of the towers on fire, about to collapse. And there's a woman in a wheelchair. They don't check her ID to see if she's important. They grabbed her and took her to safety, and then went back into the building to get more people. Because by our actions, you can see Americans respect life. That's why your police do what they do. That's why the hospitals and the doctors do what they do, and the firefighters, because we place a high priority on the potential and who every single one of our living people are in this country. And that's who we are today. Let's go on to listen. Liberty means, first of all, that you have a right to free speech. We're seeing an example of free speech right here. This is America. Liberty also means you have a right to keep what you earn. We're overtaxing the people who work and overpaying the people who don't work. most beautiful one of all is the idea of the pursuit of happiness. You see, that's based on the idea that we're not all divided. It's not, the rich guys and this guy and the people with this color skin or that color skin or male or female. The people that want to divide us are people like Barack Obama who keep saying the rich people will fix the mess that they've got. You can take everything they have and it wouldn't fix it. Okay, America is not split up in a whole lot of pieces. The vision of the pursuit of happiness means that we're all Americans, that every single one of us has the ability to pursue whatever dream God puts in our hearts, and each day is like a new page of the book, and we're writing an exciting story about what we're going to do. The people are going to tell you, you can't do it, you can't make it. And we try, and we fall on our face, and you know what Americans do? They get back up and keep trying. And that's what's going to happen. People at this election is quite simply about allowing people to pursue the dreams of their own hearts, to protect life, to protect liberty, and that pursuit of happiness. And we have a word for that. You know what that word is? It's about freedom. So God bless you all. Be strong. And in November, we're going to win. And we're going to restore freedom. And we're going to take common sense from Missouri to Washington. Not the stuff from Washington and dump it back here. God bless you all.
For 1 second getting out of this race is absurd. I heard a wonderful story. From a little girl on the radio the other morning. She's just a kid. She's a college kid. And she said, I'm going to vote in my first election in 2012. She said, I'm registered as a Republican because I don't think much of what I've seen Obama do. And she said, I got to admit, I was a little embarrassed by what I heard Todd say. But I was downright ashamed of how the Republican leadership reacted to that minor error. And she said, I'm seriously doubting whether I'm going to continue being a Republican. We have one more fellow that would like to speak to you, and Mr. Bob Sanderford, is that correct? John, excuse me, I'm sorry, I only just met him, and I'm getting old. That Alzheimer's gets on you pretty early.